What's up? How's it going? I'm Avengers Protocol, and we need to get straight into it because today's list is not small. First, a reminder that always matters with movies like this. The closer we get to release, the more accurate information tends to hit the internet. Not because the universe gets nicer, because more people touch the project, more stuff exists in near final form, and secrets start leaking like a cheap faucet. And speaking of near final, the latest info says reshoots for Doomsday are expected to start in the next few months. And no, don't hear reshoots and immediately think, oh no, disaster. Reshoots are extremely common in big Hollywood movies. Sometimes a scene doesn't play well in the edit. Sometimes they add a line of dialogue. Sometimes they want a specific character to get an extra moment. This happens on basically every major tentpole. It's not automatically a red flag. Sometimes it's just the finishing pass, like seasoning, or like duct tape. Depends on the chef. Also, it had already been reported that they're filming Avengers Secret Wars this year to get ahead, and Secret Wars filming is expected to happen in the second half of 2026. Now, do the math with me. If they're gearing up to start serious work on the next Avengers film in the second half of 2026, then in the first half of 2026, they'll likely have a cut of Doomsday that's pretty close to the final version, which means, yes, there's a real chance that by the first half of 2026, the internet will basically know the entire story. Not officially, of course. Officially, we'll all be shocked. Unofficially, we'll all be detectives.
That's why it's so important to follow reliable sources. And one of the most reliable Hollywood sources right now is John Campea, who basically said this: there's a ton of wrong information being spread about what happens at the beginning of Avengers Doomsday. He said on his podcast that he knows the major beats of the movie, most likely because he has sources working on the production. And because he knows the real beats, he can tell when people are making stuff up about the opening. One of the biggest opening scene rumors that spread recently involved Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, and Wolverine, Hugh Jackman, with claims that Spider-Man and Wolverine might die right at the start. And now that this rumor is being questioned again, the speculation came roaring back. Is Marvel leaking information on purpose? The theory goes like this: Marvel leaks a dramatic plot point, like Spider-Man and Wolverine die early, to see audience reaction. If people hate it, they cut it. If people love it, they keep it. Like a focus group, except the focus group is the entire internet screaming at once. Now, I'll be honest, I've never been the conspiracy guy who assumes Marvel is that organized. I don't think they're out here running 4D chess leak campaigns with spreadsheets and mood charts. Most of what they want in the movie is decided long before fan feedback could realistically change anything, especially at this stage when the film is already being edited. That said, fake leaks as tests have happened before. The classic example, Deadpool. Before the first Deadpool movie was approved, test footage leaked online. At the time, nobody admitted it was intentional. It was all, oops, wow, how did that end up on the internet? Weird. Fans loved it so much that Fox approved the movie. Years later, Ryan Reynolds admitted he was the one who leaked that test footage. And Marvel Studios has also been tied to controlled information leaks in the past, like back before the Avengers was produced, when there was backstage controversy because they had to replace the actor playing Hulk. Some information was allowed to leak specifically to measure audience reaction. So do I believe Marvel is leaking fake info right now? I believe it's possible. I'm skeptical. I doubt it, but it's not impossible. Now, that wasn't the only thing being discussed, because we also got commentary from Charles Murphy, and he'd be a really interesting comparison. He says Doomsday may rhyme with Captain America: Civil War in a very specific way. First, he reinforces something multiple insiders have claimed. None of the main timeline heroes will see Dr. Doom's face, meaning none of them will know he looks like Tony Stark. But we, the audience, will know, and that knowledge creates suspense. Suspense the Russo brothers can weaponize in a smart way. Here's where the Civil War parallel comes in. Yes, Civil War in the comics was bigger and more brutal than the movie version, but the comparison being made here is specifically to the movie. In Civil War, the deaths of Howard and Maria Stark at the hands of Bucky Barnes, then the Winter Soldier, are framed as a catalyst in Tony's trauma, the chain reaction that pushed him toward becoming Iron Man. Indirectly, you could argue the Winter Soldier helped create Iron Man. But even though the Winter Soldier was guilty, Steve Rogers also became the focus of Tony's rage once Tony learned Steve knew the truth. And that leads to the brutal final fight. Tony wants to kill Bucky, and Captain America stops him, creating that intense personal conflict. Now, in Avengers Doomsday, the idea is that even if it looks like Loki is responsible for the relocation situation, I'll explain that in a second, Steve Rogers becomes the story's key target. And this is where Charles Murphy drops the term Captain MacGuffin. Quick context if you're not familiar, a MacGuffin is a character or object that the entire story revolves around. Everyone's chasing it, protecting it, fighting over it, and it drives the plot forward.
So calling Steve Captain MacGuffin is basically saying Doom's entire hunt and the story's central pursuit revolves around Steve Rogers, the Steve who went back in time and lived with Peggy Carter. That makes Steve the target of Dr. Doom. Then Murphy adds, without going into major spoilers, small details suggest the Russo brothers will play with the fact that the audience knows who's behind Doom's mask. They'll set up moments that rhyme with earlier MCU conflicts, Civil War, Infinity War, Endgame, especially in ways that echo Tony Stark's relationship dynamics. So it'll feel like we know where it's going because the emotional structure looks familiar. And then the Russos pull the rug. They make us think we've solved it, and then they pivot the relationships and outcomes so we're wrong. Basically, the MCU version of, you thought you knew, didn't you? Murphy also suggests the Steve Rogers versus Dr. Doom relationship will be handled in a very clever way. He says Doom's origins, like in the comics, are driven by an obsession to solve a problem that isn't directly connected to Steve Rogers. But despite that, Steve becomes the main target of Doom's rage. He also reinforces something important. Robert Downey Jr. will be playing Victor Von Doom of Latveria, not literally an alternate Tony Stark. That matters because it shapes how the story can play fair while still messing with our emotions. Then things get even wilder. He compares Doomsday's story to something like Doom War, with a tone and atmosphere closer to Multiverse of Madness, basically a Marvel horror vibe, summarized simply as Dr. Doom invades, takes over, dominates, and in the end, every hero turns on him at the same time. Fantastic Four, X-Men, Black Panther, everyone, all at once. That's why the Doom War vibe fits. Honestly, you could argue that would be a killer title. But anyway, and that's basically what he's implying will happen in Doomsday, and it reminds him of Endgame's final battle, all heroes uniting against Thanos' army.
Except this time, it sounds like we're getting a similar massive showdown scene in Doomsday, but bigger, because you add heroes who weren't in Endgame, and because it's happening while the multiverse is collapsing. Murphy points out that the final war is expected to happen in Latveria, Dr. Doom's country kingdom, and it happens at the same time the last incursions occur, meaning the last universes collapse. So while heroes are fighting, reality is literally falling apart around them. That's not just a battlefield, that's the floor disappearing. He also notes that Beast from the X-Men is expected to get pretty dark, doing questionable things in an attempt to win. But neither Beast's plan nor Reed Richards' plan works, and eventually everyone discovers Dr. Doom's true nature, and that's when they all face him together. He goes further. All heroes from all Earths, all remaining universes, join the fight against Doom. And yes, like many people have been saying since this film was announced, including me, the heroes are expected to lose. But here's the key twist. They may not lose directly to Doom in a straight fight. If the final battle is happening while the last universes are collapsing, it's possible the collapse itself becomes the loss. Reality ends first. The heroes lose because the board gets wiped, before anybody can claim a clean victory over Doom. And that's interesting, because it leaves major story consequences for Secret Wars. Murphy even frames it bluntly. There wouldn't be an Avengers Secret Wars if the heroes won Doomsday. So instead, it looks like their defeat leads to them living in a world under Dr. Doom's rule, which matches a theory I've been pushing for a while. Doomsday ends with the multiverse collapsing, and Secret Wars shows the heroes living in a world built from the scraps of their realities. Battle world, a war world, a stitched-together leftover reality with Doom on top.
And here's where it gets spicy. A long time ago, a bunch of concept art leaked online. The directors denied it. Not ours, blah blah blah. But the art had this medieval, period-style theme that looks suspiciously like Secret Wars' Battle World concept. If that's real, that world is going to be a visual playground. And no, that's still not everything, because another big leak comes from the informant My Time to Shine Hello,
who's had some credibility going back to the WandaVision era. She said, "Remember that photo the Russo brothers posted that everyone tried to decode? The one where people wondered if it hinted at Avengers versus X-Men?" According to her, that photo was actually from the set where they filmed a scene of Dr. Doom and his family in a lab during an experiment that kills Doom's family and severely injures his body. In other words, that's the motivation scene. The moment Doom loses his family and gets the scar, his emotional ignition point. That's a big deal because it grounds Doom in something personal and brutal. You don't have to agree with him, but you'll understand why he becomes a problem the size of an apocalypse. She also claims the current runtime is about 3 hours, but since reshoots are coming, that could go up or down. And remember, Endgame was also around 3 hours, so if this ends up being a 3-hour monster too, that tracks with the scale they're aiming for. Now, there's another thread she connects that I love because it's the kind of thing that makes you say, why didn't I think of that sooner? Valhalla. Marvel already established in the Thor Love and Thunder post-credit scene that Valhalla exists, the Norse afterlife. Dead gods are there. Jane Foster ends up there after dying as Mighty Thor. And my logic has always been, if Marvel shows you something like that, they plan to use it. Well, it sounds like they're going to use it very soon, possibly in Doomsday. This ties into the moment where Thor prays. The idea here is Thor prays for Odin's help, and Odin answers by sending him an army. And you might be thinking, how? Asgard is in Norway now, there aren't exactly thousands of soldiers lined up. Odin is dead. How is he answering prayers? Here's the point-connecting theory. Odin sends an army of dead gods, dead warriors, coming out of Valhalla to help Thor in the final battle. That is absurdly epic, and it fits Norse mythology perfectly. Great warriors who die in battle go to Valhalla to await the end times so they can fight alongside Odin. Imagine that scene, the dead returning from the afterlife to join the battle. If Marvel lands that emotionally, it could be one of those crowd loses their mind moments. And it could get even more intense when you add this other claim from the same informant. In Avengers Doomsday, Dr. Doom kills everyone on the TVA, including Loki. Now, let's connect another piece, the TVA. The TVA is basically the multiverse police, and obviously they have to be involved in Doomsday, because the multiverse is collapsing in this movie. Loki has been missing since the end of Loki Season 2, where he basically saved not just the TVA, but the entire multiverse, then becomes the god of stories, holding everything together. So we expect Loki to still be connected to the TVA in some way. But then the question becomes, if multiple insiders say Doom is hunting Steve Rogers, why would Doom also kill everyone at the TVA and Loki too? This is where we go back to Charles Murphy's details. The idea is that Steve living in the past with his family causes problems for the timeline universe he's in. Steve, Peggy Carter, and their baby, named James here, are visited by Loki before Loki becomes the god of stories, before he sits on the throne, before he holds the multiverse together. So apparently, Loki goes to Steve and relocates his family, moves them, and gives Steve the ability to access, basically contact Loki and/or the TVA, which implies Steve Rogers becomes, indirectly, a kind of TVA agent. And that lines up with backstage rumors that Tom Hiddleston filmed scenes with Chris Evans for Doomsday, including at the Rogers house set. But the conclusion is, over time, the relocation of Steve Rogers, him being in another universe, starts to trigger an incursion. It begins the collapse of that universe, and that universe is supposedly the Fantastic Four's universe. That also fits the other rumor thread that Steve is in the Fantastic Four reality. And yes, I've said before, I want Loki to have a bigger role in this movie. He's too important to the multiverse to just be a footnote. But look, if Loki is connected to Steve, and Steve is crucial to the story, then Loki becomes indirectly crucial too. It keeps things coherent with what we saw at the end of Loki Season 2. It respects his importance without forcing him to dominate the entire plot. So yeah, that's a lot. And the secret phrase for this one is Steve Loki. Comment Steve Loki so I know you watched all the way to the end. More videos should be popping up on screen right now. Thanks for watching. This is Avengers Protocol signing out.